Joining me right now is Ben Jamal. He's director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and he joins us. Good afternoon to you, Ben.
Good afternoon.
Thanks so much for joining us. I do want to talk about events going on in the Middle East as well, but first up, just to tackle what this sort of bit of a battle, a bit of a war of words going on between the government, Prime Minister and Home Secretary, and what the Metropolitan Police Chief has had to say in terms of whether or not calling for jihad in the context that these demonstrations had. And again, it wasn't by any means the majority of people. It was a tiny number of people on these marches on Saturday in London. Do you think that should be against the law? Is that an offence?
Well, Julie, I think, first of all, it's necessary for you to do something which I don't think you've done very clearly in the way that you've framed the question. So my organisation led a march of more than 300,000 people through the streets of London on Saturday, a march supported by the representatives of trade unions who represent themselves, millions of British workers. I think the event you were talking about, the use of the word jihad, came at a very small march.
A side event, yes.
By an organisation that we have no links to, are not associated with. So I think, first of all, it's important that you make that very clear distinction, because a number of the media reporting on this have not made that distinction.
But I know. Hold on a minute, though. But again, I have not said that this was this happened at a march you organised. There were a number of different marches around the country. There were banners, though, held up. There were placards held up, which were very questionable. I believe some of them were against the law and anti-Semitic on the main marches that you were involved in organising.
Well, I'm not sure what you wanted me to address. I mean, in relation to the first
you're the one who's raised the point. Anyway, okay.
Sure.
Well, we've made that clear. You weren't responsible for that banner. I didn't say you were. So
Sure.
Do you think, though, that someone calling for jihad on the streets of Britain, do you think that should be an offence?
There are very clear laws that exist in relation to hate crime. I understand the police were present at that demonstration. I wasn't there. It's not a march we had anything to do with. It wasn't a march. I think it was a static demonstration. I'm not sure if you were there, Julia. I wasn't there,
but I can look at the footage. Would you mind answering the question? I'm not asking you whether you were there. I'm not asking you how many police were there. I'm asking you whether, in principle, someone in that context calling for jihad on the streets of Britain should be an offence.
Well, in this context, I think the people who were there and who have scrutinised this were the Metropolitan Police, and they have reached the judgment that they did not think a hate crime was committed. There are very clear laws about hate crime. Nobody has the right.
I don't think there are very clear rules about hate crime at all.
If the Met Police think there was not an offence committed, I'm not really in a position to second guess that judgment. That's a judgment for them.
I wonder, in different circumstances, you'd be quite happy to question the police's judgment if their judgment happened to be in your favour. Let's move on, because we're going down a very dull cul-de-sac. Okay.
If anybody were making a call, in my view, so let me be clear about the frame that we take to the current situation, which is a framework of international law. And because we think that's the best measure we have for justifying what sort of actions are legitimate, what are not. International law makes it absolutely clear that any targeting or killing of civilians is outlawed, as is the imposition of collective punishment upon entire people, as is the taking of civilian hostages. So we would condemn anyone undertaking those actions, and nobody should be making statements which glorify or justify such actions. And then we have a framework of hate crime, which distinguishes whether people are making statements or in their actions are manifesting hatred towards other people. Those should be implemented. That's the framework within which we frame what we do and the protests that we undertake.
OK, let's talk about what's been happening actually in the Middle East. Developments we've seen over the last 24 hours, particularly Hamas releasing 2 more hostages, both elderly women. We've seen 2 other women, a mother and daughter, already released. Some more than 220 hostages still being held by Hamas. They say, well, they'll consider releasing them if Israel ends their airstrikes and returns electricity, food, water supplies and the like. Israel basically saying, well, you know, you took those hostages. We are actually implementing those limitations and those airstrikes and the cutting off the water and electricity in a bid to get those hostages back to defend our land. Do you think that Israel is justified in those airstrikes, and B, cutting off the fundamental basic supplies of life, food, water, fuel?
Well, I'm going to keep coming back to the same framework, which is the one I think all commentators, all political leaders should be using if we are genuinely committed to the preservation of human rights and the implementation of international law. So international law is clear. Let's deal with hostage taking. It's illegal. It should be outlawed. Nobody should be taking hostages, and anybody who has taken hostages should immediately release them unharmed. International law also makes clear that the targeting and killing of civilians is outlawed, as is the imposition of collective punishment. So directly answering your question, is Israel justified? It is not justified under international law in imposing a siege on an entire people, cutting off food, fuel, water, essential medical supplies. And all of those committed to international law should be condemning those actions and calling for them to stop. Okay. And it is not justified in launching bombing that kills civilians. So far, 5,000 Palestinians have been killed, over 2,000.
Well, that's what Hamas claims, yes. But they are a terrorist organisation.
I'm giving you the figures from the United Nations, which I'm presuming, Julie, you wouldn't want to categorise as a terrorist organisation. So the latest figures from the United Nations are over 5,300 Palestinians killed in Gaza. More than 2,000 of them are children. Yep. There is an estimated 1,500 people missing, presumed dead or trapped under the rubble. There are, according to the latest UN estimates, 34 health facilities attacked, including 19 hospitals. All of those are illegal under international law. They should stop. And our political leaders should be calling for an end to all of those actions.
Can I clarify with you, though? You said to me the targeting of the civilians, as we saw from the Hamas terror attack on October the 7th, and indeed with their bombing, indiscriminate bombing that goes towards Israel, far fewer people dying because of the protective defence dome the Israelis have, not for the lack of the missiles being fired at Israel, by the way. Targeting of civilians, is absolutely illegal under international law. The killing of civilians, as this, again, awful phrase, as some civilian deaths happening as a result of targeted strikes, that, as I understand it, is not illegal under international law. It is understood, yes, unfortunately, that will be the case. When Hamas chooses to build the tunnels underneath civilian territory, when they choose to hide in hospitals or in mosques or in schools or in apartment buildings, when they refuse to allow people warned by the Israeli Air Force that their building is going to be attacked to leave the building or leave the area, is it Israel that's responsible for those civilian deaths? Or is it Hamas that's responsible for those civilian deaths?
Your question sort of suggests that Israel and the Israeli government has no moral agency.
Could you answer my question?
It's not. Well, I am answering it, Julie, if you allow me to. It suggests that they don't have any moral agency. They're not responsible for the bombs that they drop.
I didn't. My question suggests that at all.
You're right. Can I correct you about international law? International law makes clear the targeting and the direct deliberate killing of civilians.
No, but that's my point. But not the killing of civilians. The targeting. Julia, I've just made that point. The targeting of civilians as the purpose of your attack is illegal. If civilians die while you are targeting a legitimate target, they're not.
There is a point that you didn't make, and you were incorrect in what you said about international law. So I'm trying to correct you. International law is clear that if you are bombing in a way that is likely to kill many civilians,
different from targeting,
that you are reckless about that, that is also illegal. Now, look, I've just told you, 2,000 children.
Yeah, you told me that. Ben, the only reason I'm interrupting you is you're not answering the question I asked you. You said you've gone around skirting around the houses. When I put that scenario to you, is it Israel that's responsible for those deaths, or is it Hamas who's responsible for those deaths of civilians? Or a combination of the two? Is it 100% Israel in your mind?
The people who are responsible for the deaths of civilians in Gaza are the people who are bombing the civilians in Gaza. Which is Israel, who are indiscriminately bombing. And every time, this is not the first time, although this is the most savage and the most severe assault we have ever seen upon the people of Gaza by Israel. They have undertaken many, many attacks before, and in each of those attacks, there have always been huge numbers of civilian casualties.
You know why there are huge numbers of civilian deaths. It's because Hamas hides among the civilian population as a deliberate policy. They have been quoted saying they use the civilians as a human shield. It's a deliberate policy by a terrorist group.
I think if you keep talking over me, we're probably not going to have an interview. So
I'd like you to answer the question I asked you.
Sure. If you allow me to answer the question, then I'll answer it.
With all due respect, we don't have another 2 hours, so I need you to address the other question.
So
who's responsible? You're saying it's just Israel.
I think if you allow me to answer the question, then I can give it to you. So to put this into context, first of all, and this is important, we have a whole range of scholars of crimes against humanity is saying what we're witnessing at the moment is becoming a textbook case of genocide. 43% of homes, residential homes in Gaza, have been destroyed in the current attacks. So what we are witnessing is a campaign of indiscriminate bombing. Israel has told 1.1 million people to leave their homes and said head south, and then they are bombing people who have moved south. So all of those actions are likely to cause huge levels of civilian casualties, and the responsibility.
And I completely accept the point. It has been verified, independent verified. There is bombing in the south, which again, and a lot of people, the Western governments, we understand, people are speaking up about that. And there's a big concern about all right-thinking people about the civilians, particularly children, elderly, infirm, who are either unable to move because they're in hospital or being stopped from moving, or the people who have moved and their ability to find shelter, food, medical supplies, water. Absolutely. There's a big concern. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, announced an extra £20 million in aid to Gaza. It probably doesn't touch the size of what's needed. And the trucks going in from Egypt, again, a tiny drop in the ocean compared to what needed. However, we know that Hamas has huge amounts of fuel stockpiled. They've got food, they've got water. When they went in and committed this massacre on October the 7th in Israeli territory, they knew perfectly well what the likely outcome would be from the Israeli Defense Forces. They predicted it, they've stockpiled for it. Should they not provide those vital supplies to the civilian Palestinian people?
Well, again, I mean, let's remember one thing. Under international law, Gaza is occupied by Israel.
Well, they're not. I mean, the Israeli forces aren't occupying Gaza.
Well, again,
they withdrew.
Julia,
they withdrew about 18 years ago.
Julia, with the greatest respect, I think you need to research international law. It's very clear. There is no dispute. Under international law, Gaza has been occupied for over 17 years.
It was occupied.
Israel controls who goes into Gaza, who goes out. And actually, in fact, it's been occupied longer than that. 17 years they've been imposing a very specific blockade. It controls what goes in, what goes out, freedom of movement.
I wonder why they were trying to do that, given what happened on October the 7th.
It is illegally occupied, and under international law, the occupier has responsibility for the welfare of people under its occupation. Israel has made the decision to tighten its blockade, to impose an illegal siege, which is cutting off water, fuel, and essential medical supplies. I have no idea where your source is that Hamas currently enjoys stockpiles of food and water. I've not seen that verified anywhere. The people of Gaza at the moment are effectively existing without essential water supplies, without essential food. And as you rightly said, what's going in at the moment is a tiny drop in the ocean. And the only way of getting supplies to a people who are currently being starved, let's be clear what it means when you cut off food to people. They are currently facing the prospect of starvation if this is not lifted. The only way of achieving that is for a ceasefire so that humanitarian supplies can enter Gaza. Every decent person should be concerned at the level of death that we're witnessing and at the death of 2,000.
And we've seen the EU, we've seen already a little bit of a split between Western allies, America and Britain, not backing what the EU called for there to be a ceasefire. Do you understand why the Israeli government would feel that it was necessary to send airstrikes, put airstrikes in Gaza to try and take out Hamas, that it would be necessary to cut off these vital supplies to basically I suppose, for all intents and purposes, starve Hamas out and to evacuate those people, bearing in mind they have actually evacuated by order numerous thousands of people, Israelis, in the north of Israel because of the threat from Hezbollah to the north of the country. So they've done those evacuation orders to their own people as well. Do you understand why Israel would feel the need to do that? Do you think there is any justification at all, rather than spouting international law? I'm asking you, as a human being, you've seen the footage of what happened on October the 7th, when men, women, children, grandmothers, babies were murdered in the most brutal fashion. The evidence that has been shown about torture, including of children, pregnant women having their baby, a woman having her baby ripped from her stomach. The most horrific events we've seen, and the hostage taking. Can you, not citing international law, you as a fellow human being, can you understand why Israel would say, this isn't about revenge? This is about self-defense. We can no longer have this Hamas terrorist organization on our border. They are a threat to us and the people we represent. We need to destroy and obliterate them at whatever cost. Can you, as a human being, understand that?
Well, let me put the question back to you as a human being, Julia. And I'm really...
Why can't you answer the question?
I'm just
Put it
about
back to me after you've answered the question.
I've literally said 5 words and answered the question. You've decided I haven't answered. With respect, if you'll allow me to answer the question, you can see the answer that I give. And as I say, I'll put it back to you. And I'm a bit
okay. Get on with it then. Yeah.
At you saying let's forget about international law. We either
no, I didn't say forget about international law. I want you not to, Ben. Ben, when you do eventually get to an answer, that's what you're citing. I'm asking you, as a human being, as a man, as probably a father, as a son, as a brother, as a husband maybe, can you understand? Don't throw the question back at me. Don't cite international law. I'm asking about you. In the pit of your stomach, in your heart, in your head, can you understand why Israel would take the action they're doing? Right.
So what you're asking me is, do I think it's ever justified for anybody to commit war crimes because they are angered? They are angered at the treatment of their people. So that's the question you're asking me. If that's the standard you want to apply, then I put this question to you, because the clock didn't start ticking on all of this on October the 7th. So let me put the question to you. If you were a Palestinian, as a human being, Julia, as a mother maybe, as a woman, as somebody who cares about human life, if you were a Palestinian, if you had seen your people subjected for 75 years to the imposition of a system of oppression that all human rights monitoring agencies with credibility are saying is a system of apartheid. If in 1948 you had seen 750,000 people, including most of my extended family, driven from their homes and forced into exile, they were never allowed.
We've only got 1 more minute left, so what gets to the nub of the question?
It's the beginning of 2023 in the West Bank, not where Hamas has any operation. You had seen over 250 of your fellow citizens killed, shot by Israeli forces or killed by armed settlers. How might you respond?
Do you know what I wouldn't respond by doing? I wouldn't respond by supporting a terrorist organisation going out, beheading babies, ripping unborn babies from their mothers' wombs, beheading elderly women, killing people at a music festival and taking 222 hostages. No, I wouldn't do that. Do you know what I would do? I would say, why don't we have elections and elect an organisation that cares about us and our needs? That's what I do, and get to a two-state solution.
If you want to be a responsible journalist, there should be enough outrage at the targeting and killing of civilians. Many of the things you've just cited are absolutely not verified at all.
They are all verified. There's footage of them. No, independent journalists have seen that footage.
No, that's not true, Julian. You shouldn't cite that. There's enough to say.
Which bits do you dispute?
There's enough to say that we should be outraged and appalled at the killing of civilians. Any decent person feels that. But I would hope your viewers would extend that to the Palestinian people as well and say,
we do. We have discussed since the day of the attack. We have discussed the impact, and talked about the concerns about people on the ground in Gaza.
Have you addressed the root causes? Have you addressed what's been going on in Palestine? Let's just take 2023.
Okay, no, Ben,
have you addressed what's been
we haven't
happening
got time to do the full 75 years, my love. Or maybe we're going back 2000. I don't know. Well, we're not a history show, so we have, of course, had guests on who can explain some of that. But the point is,
your
answer, Ben, says to me, you think that it is more understandable for people in Gaza to possibly, or certainly the people of Hamas, to support the horrific massacre on October the 7th of innocent women and children than it is to understand Israel's response, which they claim is self-defense. That's the thing I find bizarre. But anyway,
Julia,
we're going to have to leave it there. Ben, I'd love you to come on again, but you spent so long repeating the same thing 3 times, we've run out of time. Ben, I'm going to have to say goodbye now. Ben Jamal, he is the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Apologies for all the talking over each other, but basically he was never going to stop talking or never going to answer my question.